Good evening and welcome to the June 28th meeting of the work session of the Manhattan City Commission. If you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The agenda today is a 2023 budget discussion with requests from outside agencies. Rena Neal, the Director of Finance for the city, is going to make an initial presentation, and then agency representatives are welcome to speak to their individual proposals. And of course, so Rena, you're on when you get a chance. When you get logged in.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Tonight, I will present information on the various outside agency requests that we have received for the 2023 budget. Included in your packet is information from each agency. There are representatives from the various agencies and the boards and committee members from the Social Services Advisory Board and Special Alcohol Fund Advisory Committee present to answer any questions at the end of my presentation. So this slide is just an overview of the agencies that we will be presenting on tonight. This next slide provides the last 3 years of budget information compared to the 2023 funding request, and it's broken out by General Fund, Economic Development Fund, our Library Fund, Library Employee Benefit Fund, Special Alcohol Fund, and our Tourism and Convention Fund. Our first round of requests are related to the social services contracts. They are provided based on board recommendation. The social services requests are funded by the general fund, and funds are used to meet the social services needs of the community. There's a 28% increase to the request over the 2022 budget, and that is equivalent to $125,000. There are 13 agencies requested for funded for 2023 compared to 10 agencies in 2022. Below the chart is a table that reflects the budget to actual information from 2016 to 2021, and then that is also compared to the value of a mill. We have 2 new agencies that are being recommended for funding for 2023. They are Be Able, as well as the Flint Hills Community Clinic. Be Able's request is to fund a caseworker, and Flint Hills Community Clinic's request is to aid in operating expenses to help in their preservation of their cash balance. This chart, again, provides from 2016 to 2021, the budget to actual, and as you can see, they were fully funded for all of those years. And then in 2022, year to date, we have funded half of the budget, and we anticipate fully funding their 2022 request. The 2023 request is $574,694. There is also a request from SSAB to provide a funding framework that future boards can use as they review and deliberate requests in the future. And that is why we have highlighted our mill levy over the years compared to those funding requests and those needs from the community from 2016 to 2023. This next slide is just a summary of the 2023 request compared to the recommendation, as well as the comparison to 2022. So in 2022, again, there were 10 agencies at $449,655 being funded. And then in 2023, the recommendation is to fund 13 agencies at $574,694. Last year when SSAB presented, they mentioned that there will be additional agencies coming forward. They had estimated about $525,000 in terms of trending with new requests. And then adding back in the Kansas State Child Development Center, that is how we got to the $694 amount. The next agency requesting funds is the Flint Hills Area Transportation Agency. They are funded from the Economic Development Fund, and they have been funded there since 2020. Prior to that, they were funded from the General Fund. Funds are used to leverage federal funding to provide transportation services in the Flint Hills region. The 2023 request is 38% or $50,000 more than the 2022 budget, and that is due to inflation and fuel costs. And so that blue line on all of these charts is just the budget line, and then the orange is the actual. I will highlight on this particular slide, in 2020, there was a shortfall in terms of funding, and that was due to Flint Hills ATA receiving federal funding due to the pandemic. I don't know why this is not progressing forward. Okay. The next two requests are related to the Manhattan Public Library and their Employee Benefit Fund. Both of these funds are funded by property taxes through a charter ordinance, and that max mill levy is 6 mills. Funds are used to pay for operating expenses, debt service on the childhood expansion project at the library, and then employee benefit costs. The city receives property tax distributions from both counties, with major distributions in January and June. And as of June, we're about 98% funded in property taxes for 2022. The 2023 library request is a 6% increase over the 2022 budget, and their forecasted mill levy is 4.328 mills, which is around the average to what they have been receiving since 2016. This next slide is the Employee Benefit Fund. Their request is 3% over the 2022 budget with a forecasted mill levy of 1.021 mills, and that aligns with their previous year's request in terms of mill levy. The next round of requests are related to our special alcohol fund contracts. Our special alcohol fund contracts are reviewed by, or requests are reviewed by the Special Alcohol Fund Advisory Committee, and they are funded by special liquor tax distributed by the state. Those distributions are received in March, June, and September, and December of each year, and then they're distributed to each agency based on the receipt from the state and their share of the total budget. The uses of the funds are listed on the screen to provide for and assist in alcohol and drug abuse prevention, intervention, and treatment programs and services. There was a shortfall in 2020 and 2021. Each quarterly update, we have been providing information about special alcohol funds and how they have came in and how we are reviewing that information each quarter to see if they are going to be allocated or not. So 2020 and 2021, they were not fully funded due to the shortfalls from the state. The 2023 request is 6% more than the 2022 request. There are 17 agencies requesting funding this year, with one new agency, True Colors, and in 2022, there were 15 agencies. So there's the chart that reflects the requests over the years. They were fully funded in 2016, 17, and 19, and then in 2020 and 2021, the shortfall. In 2022, we have made their two quarterly distributions. We'll receive another one in mid to late July, and we anticipate fully funding the agencies this year. This slide is similar to the slide that was presented for SSAB, the 2023 request for the 17 agencies compared to the recommendation by Special Alcohol Fund Advisory Committee And then that is compared to the 2022 request and budget. So in 2022, there were 15 agencies at $466,010. 2023, 492,196. And that is just a slight increase due to the new agencies, as well as some costs related to inflation, operational costs, and gas. There is a difference between the request and the variance, and the board pays close attention to that. They realize that they only have what's allocated from the state, and we have been estimating based on those prior allocations what those quarterly distributions would be, and that's how they came up with the 492 for 2023. The next 4 agencies are related to transient guest taxes, and we provide information regarding those funds every quarter as well, because they were impacted by the pandemic and had shortfalls in 2020 and 2021. Those funds are used to help support the tourism and promotion of Manhattan. Transient guest taxes are received in January, April, July, and October, and then distributed to each agency based on the receipt from the state and their share of the budget into the Tourism and Convention Fund, similar to special alcohol. We also pay for the Convention and Visitors Bureau contract, as well as debt service related to Annenberg and the Conference Center from the Tourism and Convention Fund. Our first agency, Aggieville Business Association. The transient guest taxes are used to promote and market the Aggieville Entertainment District. The 2023 request remains flat at $60,000. There was a shortfall in 2020 and 2021. In 2020, ABA made a request to have the shortfall funded by Economic Development Fund. However, they did receive some COVID relief funds and did not need to have that shortfall covered. However, in 2021, they did have another shortfall and requested that $30,000 be funded, and that was funded from the Economic Development Fund. For Aggieville Business Association, Downtown Manhattan Inc., Manhattan Arts Center, and Raleigh County Wolf House, we do anticipate fully collecting the funds for 2022 from transient guest taxes and distributing those to those 4 agencies. So I just wanted to make that known up front. We will receive the 3rd distribution in July, and we'll provide an update on collections once we receive that information for all 4 of those agencies, as well as to Convention and Visitors Bureau. Downtown Manhattan Inc. is our next agency, and their funds are used to promote and market the Downtown Entertainment District. Their request has increased to $93,000, a difference of $15,000, and that's due to rising costs and operations. Again, similar to ABA, they had a shortfall in 2020 and 2021 and made a request to cover that. They did receive $17,000 in 2020, and the balance was covered by COVID relief funds. And then in 2021, the shortfall was covered by Economic Development Fund for $39,000. Manhattan Arts Center, also funded by transient guest taxes, has requested $43,700 for 2023, which is consistent with the prior years. The funds received are used to promote and support program and operating expenses for the center. In 2020 and 21, the MAC was not fully funded due to the shortfall in transient guest taxes. They did not make a request to cover the shortfall. And then the Raleigh County Historical Society Wolf House is the last agency presented this evening. They too are funded by the transient guest taxes. Their $5,000 request is consistent with prior year's requests. The funds received are used to support operating expenses for the museum. And similar to the MAC, they were not fully funded in 2020 and 21 and did not request to cover the shortfall. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I stand for questions, and we have the various agencies here to answer any questions, as well as the board chairs and their respective board members and committee members for SSAB and Special Alcohol Fund Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Rena,
Yes, ma'am?
how was it communicated to these, like the Arts Center, that they could apply for more money? Or was it just, if they were assertive about it, they contacted you and asked the question? Or how did that word get out?
In terms of how the word got out, I believe they came in front of the city commission and made a request. We did not put anything out.
No, I'm really thinking, you've made the point several times that they got part of the money, but then they didn't come back and ask for more.
Right, because the other two agencies wrote letters and requested
Yeah.
to be funded fully.
So how did they know they could write and get more money?
I do not know how they knew to do that, but it was,
That's what I was asking. All right,
Yes.
thank you.
I believe you said it, but just to clarify, when it comes to the, all those things funded by the Tourism Convention Fund and Special Alcohol Fund, while they have a budget here, the amount of money they're gonna get is going to be dependent on what those funds really come in at. And I believe you said that if there's a shortfall, it's gonna be, or it'll be prorated by whatever percent they are of the budget.
yes, for that particular fund, yes.
Okay, so even though you may see increase of this or decrease of that, that's all gonna be dependent on what the collections are.
Correct.
Thanks. Just want to clarify.
I want to ask one question. The new agency there that the Special Alcohol Board is recommending, True Colors, could we get
Yes.
some details on what that is all about?
Yes, True Colors, I have that for you. 1 second.
Because the slide in the packet, has one thing on it, and their website has some other things on it.
Right.
So I just wanted some clarification of that.
Okay, I have it for you. True Colors Flint Hills will provide direct services, advocacy, and education in support of queer youth in response to the high rates of suicide among LGBTQ+ youth. Jamie Morris Hardiman envisioned an organization that could provide a safe space for these youth. And so that,
Packet had something else written on it that they submitted, and I looked up the website. I guess they're opening a house, Evans House or something.
yes,
1 July, and I read about all of that, and the other question was, they said $10,000, I guess, and they're talking about paying the director. So how much of that money is actually going to be used to support the organization? How much of it is going to pay a director?
so the category that they're requesting funding for is for prevention, $10,000. Their budget for 2023 is estimated at $54,335.
Okay, I never have had a problem with the special alcohol fund because it's a dedicated source, so you can only spend what you get, so that I like. It's an easy one. I've never been in favor of adding more organizations, because the more you add, the less your money goes, on that. So trying to restrict it to really essential things is my thought on that, but I think that board does a great job.
Are there any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to hear if there was any comments from the organizations that are here, if they wanted
ma'am.
to talk before we go into public discussion.
Oh, and that's next on, as soon as Rena gets through, we'll hear from the organizations, any of them that wish to speak. Rena, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure what order to go in for. Maybe everybody knows.
I can call them up.
Okay, good. I mean, whichever list you're following.
Manhattan Public Library.
Thank you much for, thank you to the mayor and the commission for hearing the outside agencies' presentations today. And again, my name is Eric Norris. I'm a director of the Manhattan Public
Yeah,
Library. It's been a while since I've
Reached back a ways.
presentation here, so My apologies for that. First of all, I just want to thank the MPL board for the hard work they put into the budget this year. We do have a member from the board with us. One of our newer members, Linda Cook, is here. We also have an employee with us, and also a representative of another volunteer group that works with us. Judy is with the MLA board, the Manhattan Library Association, which is another volunteer organization that works hand in hand with the library to help support as they can. And the MLA is actually a very interesting organization because the efforts that they put forward, they turn 85% of their revenue back over to the library and help support programs such as children's services and summer reading. So this year we worked, several months ago, the city commission was talking about property values across the community and was talking about how organizations like the library really need to challenge themselves to make sure that they're putting forward a budget that's very thoughtful and very mindful of the money that taxpayers are contributing towards these. And I do believe that the MPL board worked really hard to do that. We tried to keep the budget as flat as possible. Inside of that, the general fund did remain as flat as we could keep it, and this was due to the Manhattan Public Library Board were working to budget towards a plan. So we were seeing what we needed to do to maintain services and maintain our collection and provide the programs in the space. And then we budgeted to that plan, and we were able to keep our mill levy rate at 4.5 this year, which I was happy with. And that keeps us well below our 6 mil cap that's established by charter ordinance. Things with the library are actually looking up. Just today, I was at a staff meeting and had heard that in June we are going to exceed, we're going to exceed 50,000 items circulated. We haven't had those circulation numbers since February of 2020. So people are coming back into the library. They're using our services once again. They're exploring the collection. Right now we have a little over 2,500 people signed up for summer reading. So a lot of folks are coming back to the library, and we're really pleased to have the doors open and have people remember to come back in and see us. And we're doing a lot of community outreach to get that word out there once again. So we feel like we're coming back. We feel like we're coming back strong. Looking forward to 2023, we are putting forward a community-wide strategic plan that will allow for not only staff and board members to give input about the direction, the mission, and the goals of the library moving forward for the next 5 years after 23. But we're also going to open it up to other community organizations, community leaders, and the general community to give input to help us shape our goals moving forward. So we're really looking forward to that. And I believe that is about it. Does anybody have any direct questions for me that I can answer?
By virtue of being mayor, I serve on the Manhattan Library Board, and I know that as a new director, you have been very careful about reviewing all of the budget items, and we appreciate that you're continuing to keep the budget under well, you have to, but at least it's comfortable. I appreciate Judy Burgess being here. Yeah, thank you.
And it has, if I could add to that real quick, it has been wonderful working with a board that's conscious of that way too, of working to put the most value on those tax dollars as we can, and not just coming in and asking for as much as we can and then figuring out how we're going to spend it. We're following a plan and figuring out just the right amount that we need to move forward.
Are there questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to go in the order that was presented in the memo, only because there are agencies within SSAB and Special Alcohol Fund that are present as well that may want to respond. Flint Hills ATA. Your PowerPoint? You're good. Yep. Anything in particular, slide-wise, or the whole presentation?
Beg pardon?
Anything in particular, slide-wise, or just the whole presentation?
Presentation's fine, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's a beautiful day today, and you kind of wish you could have the meetings outside sometimes, don't you?
Exactly.
But thank you. Well, I wanted to take a few minutes this evening and kind of talk to you about transit for a few minutes. Just very briefly, Flint Hills Out of Bus. Our vision is that we believe in empowering people and connecting communities. And our missions are twofold: to provide and promote the highest quality of transit services to the Flint Hills community, and to build stronger communities and promote equality and opportunity. In Manhattan, we operate 3 different services. We have the Manhattan fixed routes, the K-18 connector, which is a fixed route that runs between Manhattan and Ogden. We go to over to Florence and in the industrial park over near the airport, and then we come into town and connect to the fixed route system. And then we also have a demand response for seniors and folks with disabilities, and for those people that don't live within the fixed route service area. If you haven't already, we do have a real-time app that is on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. It's called Transit, and you can real-time plan your trips, and you can see the buses as they're moving throughout the community. So we wanted to step back as we're all kind of coming out of COVID and the pandemic and looking at everybody has their new normal, and we have a new normal as well. But we wanted to look back a little bit and look over the last 5 years and see where we've been and how we're doing and how the current economic situation is impacting our services. So just very briefly, between FY17 and through the end of February of this year, our fixed route services in Manhattan have provided over 900,000 trips. Our demand response services in the Manhattan area over the same period of time have provided over 100,000 trips. In total, we have provided 1,018,179 rides over the last 5 years. That does not include the K-18 connector. It began operating in FY19, and it generated just under 20,000 rides. So I wanted to talk briefly about, on our demand response service, I often hear, well, where are people going? What are they doing? And this is one service where we can really kind of dig in a little bit and look at that. 57% of all of our riders on demand response are going to work. So when you see places like Power Cat Grill or Texas Roadhouse or Vista, those are people going to work. Big Lakes Developmental Center is our #1 trip generator. We are transporting clients of Big Lakes, and they are going to work. And then our 10th most popular trip generator is the Ogden Community Center. And those are people coming to and from Junction City to get on the K-18 connector. And we've been very fortunate. KDOT has recently awarded us funding to expand the K-18 connector to go all the way to Junction City. So we're looking forward to that. Not surprisingly, the K-State Union is our #1 fixed route trip generator, followed by Walmart, Dillon's, Lafayette Student Health, City Park East, the Douglas Community Center, the Med Center, the Conference Center at Blue Earth Plaza, Post Office, and Walgreens East. COVID had a significant impact on our ridership. I can tell you, though, that we expect to see a 78% increase in ridership by the end of this fiscal year compared to the end of FY21. So we are slowly recovering services and ridership, but I will tell you that we are having a significant bus operator shortage, and we have not restored service levels to pre-COVID pandemic levels. However, the demand for fixed routes continues to grow in spite of COVID, and we still see, as of the end of FY21, 67% increase in the demand for fixed route services. So beyond the economic impact that transit itself has on the community, we wanted to talk briefly about the economic impact that Addabus has in the community. From FY17 through the end of February of this year, our employees earned over $4 million, and these employees who live and work in the Manhattan area. The American Public Transit Association estimates that for every dollar invested in transit, it generates $5 in economic returns. These are real people spending their money, living and working in Manhattan. Beyond that, we have purchased over $1 million worth of fuel through the end of FY22. We've also purchased over $1.3 million in goods and services in Manhattan. So that is a significant economic impact that our company is having to support the Manhattan economy. In addition to that, we've been working with city staff, and we have identified an opportunity for us to invest an additional $500,000 to $750,000 of federal transit funds for capital investment in Manhattan. We also have already secured just under $1 million of federal transit funding for street and transit improvements at Fremont and North Manhattan and the 600 block of Points Avenue. And those projects, I think, will be going to bid later this year.
So those are just 2 stops, right? That you've,
So it'll be a total of, there'll be 3 stops in
yeah,
total.
3. Okay.
600 points will have bus shelters on both sides of the street.
Okay.
And then Fremont and North Manhattan will have 1 shelter. On top of that, we also have construction projects getting ready to go underway. We'll have a shelter at Dillon's West Loop and at the Flint Hills Gardens also. So with all good things comes rainy days. And our challenges right now, along with everybody else, is inflation. And despite the successes that we're having, inflation is having a significant impact on our budget. To put not too fine a point on it, inflation means that our local match is not keeping up, and our budget is suffering. We increased wages twice in this last fiscal year, and we simply cannot continue to raise wages at the pace that we have been doing. It just isn't possible. We have always tried to keep our wages above, or well above the inflation rate, but now, as you can see, we're no longer keeping pace with inflation. On top of that, we have spent, as of the end of January of this year, we had spent over $100,000 more in fuel costs compared to last year as well. Just as a brief sort of summary, we are primarily funded here in Manhattan with federal transit funding. It's called Section 5307. But it requires a local investment in order to access those dollars. So while we can bring 50% of the operating costs in federal funds and 80% of the cost of new vehicles and smaller amount of federal funds for administrative costs, we need that local investment. And this pie chart kind of gives you an idea of where all the different funds are coming from. So we are asking, it's a big ask, and we realize that we're asking for an increase of as Rena mentioned, 38% of $50,000. We're asking all of our local funding sources in the region for additional funding as well. We've asked for an additional $15,000 from Riley County, $17,000 from Pottawatomie County, $20,000 increase from Geary County, and a $25,000 increase from the City of Junction City. We are always seeking out new opportunities to find new local partnerships, but we cannot do it without your support. We have recently started a new partnership with the Housing Authority, and we'll be providing additional access for those persons so that they can ride the bus as well. I did want to bring up and talk about the district loop. This was a very small, short test run, if you will, that we worked with downtown and Aggieville on last Christmas. It basically was an experiment to see if we could run a holiday period shuttle. And it was a connector between downtown Aggieville and the Blue Earth Plaza. It only ran for parts of 10 days. In retrospect, we should have had it run longer than that to give it a fair chance. The ridership was disappointing when it began operating. The students had already left town, and so in retrospect, we should have started it earlier before they began leaving town. However, we had the most remarkable feedback from the service, both in Aggieville and downtown. One of the biggest comments that we had was that it wasn't running late enough. It was running till 10, but there were comments about that wasn't late enough, it needed to go a little later. And there were also some comments about the parking garage in Aggieville not being open. Overall, there was and still is significant interest and support among businesses and the community members to look more in depth at this potential loop that would increase access to and from downtown and Aggieville. And so we would welcome any opportunity to continue conversations about it and think outside the box in ways that we can provide this service again and meet the needs that exist to help alleviate some of the parking challenges in those districts. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Thank you, Ann. I'm curious about the new connections to Junction City. That's, I know it was important when we still have the Wamego connection, right?
Well, the Wamego connection has been suspended. Highland Community College was funding that.
Okay.
And they've seen a significant decrease in the number of students that are taking in-person classes in Wamego.
Okay.
We'd like to reconstitute it, but right now it's been suspended.
Okay.
So we received AIC money, which is Access, Innovation, and Collaboration. It's a KDOT funding program for capital projects.
Okay.
And this was our number one ask, was to expand access to K-18 connector. We have a lot of people that come this way who have to right now take a demand response route to get there, and it costs more and takes them longer, and it's not very user-friendly. So this fixed route expansion will be, I think, a much better solution for people traveling across the Tri-County area.
And when do you start it?
It will probably be at the earliest sometime next year.
Okay, after the first of the year. Okay. You should.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear about the loop. Hopefully that pans out a little bit better as you work with Aggieville as well as downtown. That's the connector they've been talking about for years. So it's good to see the pilot program and learn from it and make it better and bigger, longer, I suppose. But I was wondering, you mentioned the 3 shelters for the buses. I know I think it was the Job Corps or MATC that were working on plans. Is that what you're implementing, and who is building it? Is it someone local or outside the community?
So in the years past, before COVID, We had worked with actually architecture planning and design at K-State. We
That's right.
sponsored a design studio, and they designed the plans for the shelter. And then we partnered with MATC, and they fabricated the first 3 that will be installed on Points and on Fremont. And those are getting galvanized right now in Salina, but they're constructed, and they'll just have to be assembled on site during construction.
It's good to know that everything's local, so all the
And then
resources.
the other 2 that we're doing, we have a contractor, and they'll be fabricated on site there, and it's a local contractor.
Sounds good, thank you.
Are there other discussion? Is there further discussion? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you all so
Thank you
very
very
much.
much. Appreciate
Have a good
it.
evening.
Aggieville Business Association, Mr. Cook is here. There's no formal presentation. That you did have a letter in your packet, and we come forward to answer any questions you may have.
Dennis Cook, welcome.
Thanks. Ain't worth much, so.
Yes, sir, I got you.
Good evening. Thank you for having this presentation piece. Like I said, I'm Dennis Cook with Aggieville. Our request is the same as we've had since 2018. And we hope that works out. Our agenda is we want to just be the best shopping and entertainment district in Manhattan for the locals, the visitors, and the temporary residents. Our big thing is we're really, right now, we're really involved in the Aggieville Vision Project. As anybody knows, if you drive by Aggieville, we're visioning all over the place out there. But we've had some progress. We did get the parking garage open, and that was a great get, and that opened up on April 15th. We're still waiting until I think it's the first of the year when we add the parking plan on how that will be paid for on a regular basis, but it certainly helps. We are also, with everything that's going on, more living and working and living opportunities. But everything that we're trying to do is, we think, impacts favorably on the city. But again, the Aggieville Vision's on track, and I think it's going to be great to drive economic growth for the city. We're doing a lot of stuff right now. We're working a lot with the university on some of their projects, as far as even some signage and some events with them. So the more we tie in, the better off we are. We'll tell you right now, we're at 106 active businesses, and with a couple more coming in. We do have we have a meeting on Thursday, and we'll get to hear from Back Nine Development, and we'll hear about where they are on the Midtown project. Last I heard is they're still looking at maybe a November start to that, and we'll have to figure out another way to get in and around Aggieville. But all these things are a good piece for us, and if anybody wanted to know about exactly where we are, what we've been doing now is every Friday morning at 8:30, we're holding a meeting and making it available to anybody in the district to come by, and myself and John Patrick with McCown Gordon are meeting with anybody that shows up, and we're answering questions and talking to them and trying to tell them, here's a map and here's what it's going to look like, or here's what it looks like today. We will tell you that tomorrow, Linda, you and I were talking about that, tomorrow, Little Morrow will be open, and that will be another access to get down Morrow. That's we'll actually have two ways to get into Aggieville from the west, so that will help us out. So anyway, we're working hard to try to make sure that we're doing the best job possible. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Gina Snyder with Downtown Manhattan, Inc. That included in your packet, there was the request and, okay,
Thank you.
let me see.
Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have to say, I'm really happy to be giving this presentation because it's my favorite time of the year, as you guys know. I love to talk about downtown. It's a true story. I do want to say really quick before we get started, I wanted to mention about the library. We have a partnership with them called Story Walk, and it's been going on for about 2 years now, and it is really awesome. If you don't know what it is, it's through the Children's Library, and we post actual pages of a story on these beautiful boards that are in downtown business windows, and our parents go around. It started during the pandemic, which was just an awesome way for them to get outside with their family and their children. It's one of the top, in our surveys, it's one of the top requests. So just want to mention briefly the Attabus District Loop. While we didn't have the ridership that we would have wanted, the feedback once, oh, I missed it. It kind of came and went before anybody sort of realized what was going on. But in surveying our stakeholders and our patrons, this is something that is very desirable to get us between downtown and Aggieville, and I do think that it would have tremendous economic impact. Also, as you know, I like to take this time every year to really express my gratitude to city staff that has been just really exceptionally helpful to us downtown. Terry Bussey is a crew leader with the street department, and he has done a phenomenal job working around the platforms, or his crews, working around the platforms, removing snow and making sure that Points Avenue is accessible. It is an emergency route. He's just done a phenomenal job. Anytime there's any work that needs to be done, he communicates with me directly. He calls me, he asks me, hey, can we block off this street? What time is best? Just phenomenal communication, which makes everything so much easier for all concerned. And the other person is Susie Mullen. She's the customer service supervisor at the front desk, and she handles all of the permitting, and she is an absolute expert with the open container ordinance that we passed, her and Jared both. Millions of questions to get this done, and she knows that ordinance inside and out and has been absolutely integral to us being able to get our very first event down the road, which will be in September. So I just wanted to make sure that my gratitude was expressed because none of this is possible without our partnerships. This is our mission statement. Sometime when you have free time, which I know is never, please take the time to read it. It was written many, many years ago, and it remains relevant today. As you know from Rena's presentation, we are requesting an additional $15,000, and this is primarily due to the fact that we have just a huge demand from our patrons and our stakeholders that we provide larger, higher quality events. And then we've also, obviously, along with everybody else, incurred rising costs in virtually all areas. Our board sets initiatives both annually and 5 years, and then real long term. And just to keep it pared down within 5 years, we're constantly working off of this roadmap. And I'm really happy to say that we are making a lot of improvement. Yellow is in progress, green is completed, and I'm still holding out for that access to linear trail from downtown. I want to tell you guys, this is the honest to goodness truth. We get phone calls in our office from people staying in the hotels downtown that are maybe staying for 2 or 3 days, and they are bike enthusiasts, and they call my office. I don't know why. I don't know how many phone calls the hotels get, but they call me and they ask me, hey, I'm looking at this map, but I don't understand how to get from the Hilton to the linear trail? Am I not seeing something? Well, there is no safe access. It's pretty sketchy. You have to cross Fort Riley Boulevard, and you have to kind of go down this back alley, and it's not anywhere that I would ever send any families or anything. So this is just something that if we could look at it at some point would just be awesome. So then the other thing that our DMI Board of Directors does on an annual basis is we set out to achieve in 3 very specific areas. We want to achieve very specific goals. And like I said before, and you can read these at your leisure, in progress is yellow and completed is green. So you know that every year I survey our stakeholders and also our patrons. This information comes directly from these surveys. We had this year, thus far, this goes June to June, from the last time I talked to you about this to today. So 27 new businesses opened, 15 closed, and we had a net gain of 12. We are more occupied than we have been in the 14 years that I have been downtown. We turn away business fairly regularly because we don't have the space for them. Some of that has to do with the museum coming and the fact that we had all of those office spaces, and now we tried to do an infill of those businesses into spaces that we had available, but honestly, we didn't have a lot of space, so we have lost some of our businesses to other parts of town. Our employees are down, and that's a reflection of the current workforce. And it just, I know that I probably should say more about this. It's hard to get access to this broken down to my district, but we do generate millions of dollars in sales tax, and obviously we have huge property tax contributions, and I think that that's important to remember. This is just a listing. At your leisure, you can look at it, of the businesses that have opened and closed. I would like to make notice just of the renovation that's occurring. If you all think about where Tallgrass Tap House is, the building directly to the east of that, to the west of that was the House of Prayer. That building is undergoing renovation, and it will become 2 new businesses. On the west side, it will be Strucker Nelson Art Gallery, and on the east side, I can't disclose who it'll be. So excited though, because we'll have 2 new spaces, and they'll be contributing, which is just awesome.
What kind of business? A store or a restaurant? Can you say that?
Can't say. Okay. Also part of our survey, down from last year, 30% of our businesses are seeking employees. So the flip side of that, though, is that most of them are reporting that they are doing more with less. So they've cut back on positions in order just to sort of, cope and scale. 93% obviously are reporting that the costs are really at an all-time high, and indicate technology costs, labor shortages, and supply chain issues are big hurdles for them. We survey our patrons every year, and I want to point this out as my favorite, best news of the day, of the year, of the decade, actually. We have catered mostly to 2 very specific demographics for a very long time: young professionals and retirees with extra cash. This year, I am thrilled to say that we have had representation nearly equal of all age groups and all income levels, reporting that they come down to shop and eat and participate in events on a very regular basis. And this is something that we have worked so hard for over the last 5 years, is trying to find and create events and sort of like venues and spaces and activities similar to like just the partnership with the library, the story walk, the 12 Drinks of Christmas, the parade, just all of these things that all spectrums, all ages, everybody is welcome downtown, and it's really paying off, and it thrills me to see this reflected in our survey. Third Thursday is what they come down for most, holiday parade and holiday open house. We have such awesome, that's such a retail event. It's really beloved. The other thing that I really like to report this year, we asked a very specific question, and that was about our visitors. And I was so interested to find out that most of our visitors, half of them, come from another state or not even from this region. And the way that we sort of gauge that, and I don't know how specific this is, but we asked our patrons who live here, when you host someone from out of town, where are they coming from? And we literally received just dozens of zip codes that we were able to figure out were not, in our, technically our region or in the state of Kansas. So that was 50%, I mean, that's just a lot. Most wanted thing in downtown, outdoor event spaces and gathering spaces. And as you know, we've all been through this presentation from BBN. This is the mall. This is the redesign on the plaza. And we're really hoping to see this come to fruition. It is absolutely unused, underutilized space. The electric doesn't work there. There's nothing we can do there. We turn away bands all the time because we can't, there's no place to put them. We basically need this space to be flattened out with some new electrical and some lighting, and we'd be able to have a lot of different events in this space, and we would be able to have the kind of open park area that you see being used at Blue Earth Plaza with parents and their children in the Blue Earth Plaza area. You'd see similar use of that, just open door gathering space.
So Gina, is that considered mall property or is that considered city property?
It's city property. Sure is. It's city property.
And so when you're saying 98% occupied, is that like, is there something in the old Blue Moose place? Or is that the
No,
one?
there's nothing in the Blue Moose space, but while I can't tell you what it is,
There's something coming.
there's something hanging on the hook.
So, but that's not considered, like when you're saying 98%, we're not counting it, whatever empty space might be in the mall, that's their thing, which is
Correct.
different than your thing.
Correct.
But
So,
you consider the plaza area as part of your domain there.
yes, absolutely. Technically speaking, within the legal boundaries of downtown, the mall is within the legal boundaries of downtown, as is Manhattan Marketplace, where Best Buy is. It's very hard for me to get numbers from them because the employees just come and go out of that area. I've tried every year to get consistent numbers, and I can get an average of about 800 employees that work in that general vicinity. And I'm happy to say that their vacancies are filling up, but I don't generally count the mall or Manhattan Marketplace in those numbers, even though they are within our legal boundaries. This is just a glance. Photos, beautiful photos of so much economic development happening downtown. We have all-time number of events now with 18. This year we will add a new event, which I'll get to in just a second. And I'm hoping that everybody knows this, but number one annual Manhattan event is the parade. So, of course, we just get so much joy out of doing this parade, and all of the people that are downtown that just, I mean, we get so much feedback. It's crazy. The parade has grown every single year as far as parade participants. And I like that we renamed it to the Manhattan Spirit of the Holidays Lighted Parade, and then we kind of got away from all of the stuff that went along with it. I think it just makes it easier for messaging, and now we can actually create a logo that we can use year after year after year, and we don't have to change it back and forth between holidays and Christmas and all that. So really happy that the community loves that event. And just to recap, this logo that you're looking at is brand new, and we have released it in the last few months. Along with a branding campaign, which is about time. We've had a record number of racers in our Pink Up the Pace, which means that we were able to donate more money than ever before at about $3,600. We've had record number of artists and performers and entertainers to Third Thursday. And as I said, we've added 3 new events to our calendar of events. We have a new mural walk. You can find it on our website. We now have 10 murals downtown, and you can follow along, and it shows you the map and how to get there and all about the artists and what they're interpreting. We were an official sponsor of the sanctioned Regional Air Guitar Championships, and word on the street is that it's possible that we could be the national location, so stay tuned. And probably the best thing that we did this year that the board really supported in my decision was to take our part-time event coordinator and promote her to the full-time event manager, because our events, 18 events, that's a lot of events, and she's really good at staying on top of them and really messaging them and creating content and designing logos for these events and executing them. So this is Danielle, my event manager, and I'm just really grateful to have another full-time employee working with me. And we're really, really excited about this. Stay tuned. Any questions?
I'm curious about the residential uses, mostly second floor, I would think. And if you've been able to grow that, or if that's, there's only so much room, so it could be at a level.
Yep, so our residential is considered anything above the commercial, but also all of the multifamily apartment complexes that are in our legal boundaries. Those honestly have been near capacity since they're available. When an apartment comes available, especially one of those high-value loft apartments over commercial space, it doesn't even get advertised. It goes so quick. We are the one initiative that we've just stumbled along with and had a lot of trouble getting any traction until this year, is wanting to look at the neighborhood south of Points, where we can look at the housing for families. One thing that we have been learning in our surveys that's so easily trackable is that young professionals love to work downtown and live downtown and spend their money downtown and go to all the events downtown. But once they achieve a certain rung on the ladder, or they get married, or they have a baby, there isn't anywhere for them to go with a yard or where they can push a stroller all the way down a sidewalk and not fall into it's the infrastructure in those neighborhoods is not great. And we end up losing them to the west side of town. And it takes a long time, honestly, to get them back. They grow roots and they go to school over there and they're busy over there, and they don't come back as often as they used to. So I would really love to see, and we are working with community development with the housing initiative. I really would love that neighborhood to just come alive with single family homes that are safe and you know who your neighbors are, and the multifamily homes maybe can't be multifamily anymore. They need to be single family. I don't know how all that works, but that's an absolute desire, is to be able to be closer to downtown where you can walk to the grocery store and ride your bike to the grocery store and get to the library and those kind of things. It's an absolute desire.
Are there other questions?
Yes, I had a couple. So you said the demographics have changed from just young professionals and individuals with disposable income.
Yes.
How do you gauge that? How do you know?
So
How do you track that, I guess?
we have been doing these surveys for about 10 years, and we push them out in all variety of locations, whether that's social media platforms, our website, other community organizations that use their email databases to help us push these out. And we've just over 10 years tracked it. And we ask them, we don't ask them their name, but we ask, who are you? What is your gender? Where do you live? What, 503 or 502? What's your income bracket? What is your age? How often you come downtown, and what do you come down here for? And we really have captured over 10 years that information, and I would love to compile all of that together and let you all see it if you're ever interested in it.
It'd be good to see, because I think there's this assumption that Aggieville, attracts a different crowd, and downtown attracts a different crowd. Pretty much like you said, young professionals and individuals with disposable income. But if there's a mishmash, that's what I'm hoping the Adibus Loop will be incentivizing that, between that, because they're really both good business districts, as well as other businesses that we have in our community, but it would be good exposure for both communities.
100%.
To mix and match.
100%.
My next question is, you showed the holiday parade. Is that a DMI event? Is that a Flint Hills Breadbasket event? Whose event is that?
Well, I think it started out as a city event, but it's a partnership. I mean, I run all of the meetings. We do all of the coordination of the parade entries, the logistics. Parks and Rec has recently gotten involved in the last, 4 or 5 years. Breadbasket doesn't have a strong role in the parade itself. It's more of that mayor's holiday food and fund drive. And the idea was that the parade should be part of the food drive, but it honestly has never really done what it was supposed to do as far as being a place to gather food. And I think in that, not that the Breadbasket isn't involved, because they are, and it's great to have them, their presence, but I think there are better ways to collect food, and I think Carla would agree with that. Although I think that she's also willing to try to come up with new ways. But we've designed a logo for it. We organize it. We do most of the coordination.
That's all I wanted to know. So you're probably the main contact.
Yeah.
Typically the contact, because I know Mary Beth used to go in and do some of these things. But there was always this confusion, like,
Yeah.
It was the city, is it downtown, is it Brent?
Yeah.
Although there's partnerships, there's one contact, or
Yeah.
the one that runs the meetings or gets
Yeah.
them into the room.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks so
I
much
think-
for hearing me on this. I really value this time and truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm not for sure if anyone is here from Manhattan Arts Center.
Yes.
Okay.
Penny. Mhm.
The letter was included in your packet. How are you doing today?
Sorry, I didn't bring you a presentation. I thought we were just here answering questions.
You're fine, ma'am. You're perfectly fine.
And
We have it.
I've just had a cold, so I'm a little bit squeaky. I did want to thank you for your ongoing support over the years. It's meant a lot to us. You mentioned that we hadn't asked for any extra this past couple of years. We actually managed to find some really nice grants. We got a couple of PPP loans that were forgiven. Mid-America Arts Alliance had a grant. KCAIC had grants. And the biggest one for us was the Shuttered Venue grant, which was over 100,000, which for us is a lot of money. So we've actually done quite well. So what I am really concerned about now is this coming year, because those grants were just for that period. As everyone else here has mentioned, and as everyone knows, that our prices are going up like nobody's business. I think our insurance on the building has gone up 25%.
Wow.
It's a lot. But that's essentially what has kept us going. We had a board retreat last year and looked at various graphs right from the beginning of when we started using QuickBooks, which is 20 years ago, and everything went up, up, up. I mean, with a few dips, but until just recently, the revenue from tuition kept going up, mainly because of our collaboration with K-State, the Music, Theatre and Dance Department. Admissions went off a cliff. But by keeping our expenses down and trying to keep people coming in, we have managed to keep going. We recently lost 2 of our best staff. So out of a staff of, we say 6, but 2 of them are very, very part-time. So there are 4 of us mainly in the office. and 2 of them just left. Both of them, not because they didn't like us, they'd both been there 6, 7 years, but because their husbands worked at K-State and they got jobs elsewhere. So that was quite a blow, but I've got a couple of new staff, and I think they'll do really well. We are working with a consultant on a master plan to figure out where we go from here, because we need to do something. We are just out of space everywhere. In fact, I was just reading an email from one of our studios saying there's no space here, we need new space. And we hear that from everybody. We don't have storage space, we don't have enough space for all the performances that people want to put on. We do make ourselves available to other programs that aren't, they're not part of us, but if someone wants to put on a concert or something, we usually make it work. So we're looking at trying to move ahead, see what we need to do. We're just about to start. We're working with locally Bruce McMillan and Anderson Knight. Start some community conversations to find out what the community wants. So we'll see where that goes, and we'll see where finances take us this year. So we really, really appreciate your support, especially this year. So thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Thank you for keeping your request flat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Penny.
Raleigh County Historical Society Wolf House. Hi, how are you? You're welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor Morris, and Mr. Fear. It's nice to be with you tonight, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present our request. My name is Catherine Hensler. I'm the new director of the Riley County Historical Museum, and tonight I'm representing the Riley County Historical Society, who operates the Wolf House. And one of the cool things that I've learned in just my 4 weeks in this post is our institutions have a long-standing partnership. In fact, we figured out the time frame, and it's running at 107 years. So thank you for that long-standing commitment and support. Something exciting that's coming up in the next year in 2023 is the Wolf House Museum will have been open for 40 years. So it's going to be a big year for us. As you know, the last 2 years, through COVID and the loss of our longstanding director, Cheryl Collins, it's been a very trying time for the museum, the society, and the staff people. We are requesting a flat request from the years past at $5,000, and that will go to assist in operational expenses, and that could be anything in the realm of maintenance, supplies, utilities, and educational expenses. And I'm sure you also know we are open, the Wolf House Museum is open on weekends to the public, so Saturday and Sunday hours, but then come spring, March, April, May, hundreds of fourth graders descend upon our site, and we provide local history education to the youngsters. So we just feel that history is very important to the younger generation, because if we don't introduce history at a young age, we can't cultivate that love of place, or that belonging, or that understanding of where we came from. So we thank you for considering our request, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I think we understand the program pretty well. It's a pleasure to see you here tonight.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Next, we will have representatives from the Social Services Advisory Board to come forward to answer any questions. The presentation was provided as part of a report for you all. I don't know if Marcia or Angie or anybody want to actually do a formal presentation, but I will bring it up in terms of the report for you all to review if you have any questions of them. So here's their report, and again, I had put in the PowerPoint presentation, their requests and their history of their requests. And here they are. If you have any questions, feel free.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we were not planning on a formal presentation. It was our understanding we were just to answer any questions that you might have, but we're absolutely happy to do so. So if you want to take a peek through any of the materials that you have. Hopefully everything was clear in your packets.
So the Flint Hills Community Clinic is one of the big boosts over, from 0 to 36. Did something change significantly in the last year? And I know they said something about, under the different hospital administration and ownership, that's affected them. Is there something specifically happened in the last year or something down there?
So the Flint Hills Community Clinic, this is their first, they've been around, obviously, as you know, for a long time. This is the first year that they've requested funds from SSAB, so they were a new agency this year. And I think we've got first another, if you want to come on up, you can probably speak to that better than I can. So I think the switch hasn't happened just immediately. It's been just a few years. So if you want to speak to that, thanks for.
So my name's Rick Hernandez. I am the executive director for Flint Hills Community Clinic. We have been around since 2005. We were in partnership with Via Christi, then Mercy Regional Hospital, and the Ministerial Alliance, and the hospital funded our clinic by way of salary for quite a number of years. And then in 2017, when Ascension came on board, they gave us a couple of years to prepare for those dollars to resend out. And so we've been busy to try to accommodate our budget with other funding resources. We were able to bring about 2.5 years. We have 2.5 years worth of deficit funding sitting in reserve, but 2.5 years is not very long, and especially when supply chain and medical supply costs are increasing, as well as insurance costs as well. So we still have a full staff of volunteer physicians and APRNs. Without them, we could not exist. We only have a paid staff of 3 individuals, and we don't plan on increasing any of those, increasing the cost of those staff members at all. We're just trying to close the gap of our deficits so that we can stand by those reserves in case we have another situation like we've had in the last couple of years.
I think something interesting to me was who you cover, who you don't.
Yes, we actually see people who are uninsured up to 200% of poverty level, and we've always been that way. We've not changed that. We know that there is expansion, Medicaid expansion conversation that's been going on for a number of years, but we believe that we'll still facilitate a number of individuals that are in need, even without that Medicaid, with the Medicaid expansion. Then we'll just turn our eye toward individuals that are underinsured. There are countless number of people in Manhattan and Riley County who have health care insurance, but the cost of the insurance may be attainable, but it's not very useful when they're sitting on about a $10,000 to $20,000 deductible. So they become extremely not uninsured, but underinsured for sure. So we'll turn our eyes toward those individuals as that plays out.
Well, how many hours a week are you guys open down there?
We're open from 9 a.m. to 4:30. We have 3 day clinics and we have 2 night clinics. We are beginning to work with the Kansas State University's PA program that's starting it has started, and so we're providing 2 clinics per month for them to do some clinicals as well as some volunteering as well for that. So that opens up a couple more clinics so that we can meet the needs of more people. Last year we saw about 1,000 people and we touched them about 4,000 times. And we just see that those numbers increasing exponentially now. our collaboration with the hospital is not ended. It may not be a business model, but we certainly still see referrals back from the hospital because they don't want their emergency department to be a medical home for people that cannot pay. So we work still very closely with them and other medical agencies in the city on a Clinic Without Walls program so that we can make sure that these people are being seen on a regular basis and have a medical home that they can go to.
And you have, do you have bilingual services as well?
We do. We have 3 interpreters that work as volunteers, and those numbers are increasing as well. So we're working very closely with Kansas State University and their Spanish department, because that's the primary, secondary language that we see. And so we're trying to facilitate that as much as possible.
But you still do get funding from the hospital then?
No, we no longer get funding from the hospital. That ended in 2019. Our main funding sources are corporations, individuals. We have a grant from Kansas Department of Health and Environment through the community-based program. But this year will be the first year that we've seen an increase in several years.
It's pretty flat. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, we think this was a significant need in our community and a gap that hopefully we can help fill in our recommendation for Flint Hills Community Clinic.
And last year, we weren't able to do it. We didn't have all the as I recall, there wasn't sufficient documentation as they
Correct.
were maturing or developing.
Right. So as you all know, I think Be Able, last year, we did not recommend funding from our group. I think a couple of the others may have recommended some amount of funding. We just didn't feel like we were at a point in that time that we quite understood the ask, what exactly was, being
Sure.
done with the money specifically enough to feel like we were being good stewards of the city's money. This year, they came back. They really did a great job addressing all of those concerns that we had asked about the previous year. Did a couple of site visits, so feel really comfortable in that recommendation and know that they're doing really important work in the community. Anything you want to add?
They
to that?
said there were 3 new organizations. I understand the clinic as well as Be Able. What is the other one?
Just 2 new organizations.
Two new organizations.
K-State Child Development Center.
Right, they came back.
Kind of did some reorganization and then have come back for a funding request again. Yep, so that would be the 3rd.
They were
So-
closed for a while, a year.
They were closed for a significant amount of time. That's restructured,
Yeah.
Kind of merged with another entity on campus. We know that childcare continues to be a significant need in the community. I will say we made a lower recommendation for them right now. Sounds, from what we understand, staffing, as it is in many places, has been a huge challenge for them to get qualified staff in order to have enough kids that we can even give the scholarships. So that's why we made the lower recommendation for them than they had asked for this year.
And I didn't, typically you send us huge packet about everything that's in it, but I don't remember if I saw it or not. But was there any conversation about what some of them received from, we heard from COVID funds or CARES funds or ARPA funds or anything like that? And although that was a one-time shot, I don't know if anybody's also eligible for that anymore this year, or was that part of your questioning process?
We continue to ask those questions, and I would say almost across the board, that money's been exhausted at this point in time. Did you want to say something about that, Rena?
The mayor also had that similar question, and like Marcia mentioned, that was discussed and asked. I'm on the same side as Special Alcohol Fund. 2020, 2021, similar to what Manhattan Arts Center, those funds have been applied for, exhausted. They do look for other opportunities to apply for additional funding if it's out there and if it becomes available.
And I would say that when they come to us, it's for a very specific need. So like Boys Club, Girls Club might come and it's for after-school care, stuff that money is not allowed to be used for. So our stuff tends to be very focused for some project or service that is just a specific funding that they can't use that for.
Okay. Thank you. I would make an advertisement that Marcia Horning has been the chair of the committee. I don't know.
Angie Stokes.
And,
Vice chair.
hi, yeah, I'm glad to see you. But there are several people who've been serving on the Social Services Board that are ending their eligibility time, and they're like 5 positions. So if someone's interested in serving, I'd like you to please consider putting your information on the city's website so we can fill the board back up again, because it's going to have one member, David Stewart. No. He was just recently appointed, so, but I do want to keep the board, full, and because I know you do a lot of work, and I think if we divide it up into small enough pieces, it's much more doable. I appreciate the labor and the blood, sweat, and tears you go through trying to make these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Before we leave, and I appreciate that question, or the calls, I guess, to, we do need some new members, so if anybody's paying attention online and thinks this, it's important work, looking at all of these organizations and evaluating the work that they're doing and making recommendations. Before we leave, I think I might just leave it with you that, one of the challenges that this group continues to struggle with is because we make a request from the general fund, and there's so very different from, one of you mentioned special alcohol, here's the allocation, divvy it up. And ours looks very different than that, since it's just a request. First, I want to say we know there's always more needs than the requests that we're making. We always ask organizations, if we could, meet all of your needs, what would that look like? And it's far more than this small number that we ask for, and we try to be very good stewards and strategic about that. But one of the kind of guideposts I guess we've been looking at lately is a mill, and not that I think we need to be locked in. I'm not requesting that we get a mill every year, but does that make sense to use as sort of a guidepost for funding? If you look through that packet, we did include that information against our usual mill for the previous year. And I feel like that it seems to be a good, I was going to make everybody dizzy if I scrolled through that. So
You're fine.
But I think that's something that might be worth considering. That allows for growth as our community grows, and we expect needs to grow at the same time. So like I said, I would leave that with you to maybe consider for guidance for the board moving forward.
And it's staying within the range that you've been recommending.
Yeah, and I don't think that was intentional until the last year or two. We really started looking at that, saying, gosh, we tend to align pretty closely as you look at that trend line go up along with our mill rate. So again, we've been examining that. I would be afraid to say, hey, we need a mill, because who knows, we may get more organizations that the city commission wants to fund, but that's the closest we've come to asking for a recommendation for how do we budget for this? How do we make those calls? That, like I said, it continues to be a challenge that we work through every year.
And in the process of going through the budgets this year, a lot of the consistent organizations needed more money. And we kind of took a look at that and said, here's the track, and we have to say maybe a 10% increase, because we can't just go to the city and jump from this number to this number. So we kind of made that decision that was, reasonable. And again, there's a lot of discussion about what control we have and where that budget could be more clear, or guidance more clear for the board.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate all your time as volunteers.
Next is the Special Alcohol Fund Advisory Committee, again, similar to SSAB. Their recommendations are included in the packet. There's one new agency, True Colors, that has their request included. Judy Burgess is our chair for that board, and there's other board committee members here. Judy can come forward, and the committee members can come forward to answer any questions. And I do want to bring up their allocations over the years and the shortfalls as they are funded differently. Let me see, where's that PowerPoint? Here it is. Okay, Judy?
Thank you. Arthritic knees are a real pain, pun intended there.
Yes.
First, I'm Judy Burgess, and this is Kevin. We both serve on the board. First, I'd like to say thank you to Rena for putting together a lot of information and numbers in a very readable PowerPoint. I think it jumped out at me, and you can see it in this slide, the impact that our board and other organizations here tonight felt during the pandemic. And it was said people were doing more with less, and in our case, our agencies were doing exactly that because their numbers were going up during the pandemic, and they did a really good job of continuing to serve the community. Our goal this year was to maintain funding levels as much as we could for the agencies. We had one agency that requested less, and then we had the new agency and increased a couple that are new and growing. I think that one other thing to mention is during our conversations, during our site visits, there was a common thread that we need more sober living facilities. So there are, I think, some efforts being made. The problem is with nonprofits, they have a partner that will help them fund this, and real estate just goes too fast in Manhattan, and they can't get it, do what they need to do in that short amount of time. I'm impressed with our agencies and what they do. They work hard, and like I said, their numbers are increasing, but hopefully that'll level out now. Kevin, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Kevin Bryant, I've been a board member for 2 years now, and it's been nice to see the collaboration between each one of the agencies and identifying the niches that are missed by conventional healthcare, conventional therapy. We look hard at these organizations, and we ask questions, and we figure out that we are going to be inclusive for all the people in Manhattan, and all these agencies that we have up there reflect that, which is something we're very proud of at this board. Thank you.
Just one other comment. They were talking about COVID funding going away, and our agencies talked about fundraisers that they typically have that they couldn't do during the pandemic. So that was another hit to their budgets as well. We'll entertain any questions.
I was curious about your comment about the sober living housing units. Is that something that should be included in our housing study that we're doing about the need for something like that? As a part of the overall, I mean, we should be talking about the overall housing situation.
Right now, there is an Oxford House for women, but sober living for men, limited.
Okay.
If anything at all. One person used the comment, or used the term recovery community. We're not a recovery community in talking about sober living facilities. Okay. And that just helps them into their transition back into the workforce or getting an education. And it's an important piece.
The halfway houses have been, Oxford House was the halfway house for, that we had, and it went away. And of course, the combination of the real estate prices and other issues that are on there, the Oxford House does have one house running, and then from what we learned from all the agencies that we've talked to is that there needs to be a men's portion of that where they have a halfway house for recovery so they can get back to. Be Able is doing a good job at trying to fill in that block, and there are a couple other organizations that are trying to do that too. And they were looking forward to that, and that's one of those components that we need as part of a recovery community.
Last I knew, I thought we had an Oxford House for men, but not for women, but that's not the, I mean,
Exactly.
see how easy it is
Yes.
to lose out on the latest information, and that's probably really old information.
And these agencies have identified a need for that.
Yeah.
And when they need that service, then they go to other communities for it.
Topeka has some, I know. Okay, are there any comments from the commission? Appreciate your
Thank you.
coming. Thank you. Thank you both.
That concludes the presentation of the agency requests, commissioners. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the outside agency requests?
I don't think so.
Okay. Ron?
Can we have comments? Yeah. Okay. At this point, we've concluded the official or the formal presentation. If there's someone here, or several someones, that would wish to speak to the social service requests or the budget, that's the focus this evening, if you'd please come forward. We'd be glad to hear your thoughts.
Good evening, friends. Nice to see you. I'm Jamie Morris Hardiman. I'm here wearing many, many hats today. This is my purview here, talking about social services, so I'm always excited to get a chance to talk just about the community as a whole. I'm so glad to see the Flint Hills Community Clinic being included with SSAB's recommendation. There are 150,000 Kansans without health insurance right now. That's significant. And those people are costing all of us money because they go to the emergency room for their health care because that's their only option. And isn't it much better to be able to provide them services that actually are providing for their dignity and making sure that they're being cared for? So thank you for that consideration. I think that's really important. Just as a general advocate for those who need social services, I'm also very concerned about inflation, gas prices, what that's looking like for our families who are struggling right now to get to work. At a bus becomes that much more important, right? As we have families that are struggling to be able to pay their rent and utilities, Shepherd's Crossing becomes that much more important. So I'm so thankful that we have such a strong social service network in Manhattan, but the need is incredibly great and only growing. So thank you to the city for paying attention to the fact that social service needs exist. It definitely is a large portion of our community. You know, the school district still reports 38% of kids on free or reduced lunch. So that means families making 185% or less of the federal poverty guidelines, and that's significant. Those are the families that are really struggling to survive in this community and need to use the social service network. So I appreciate the consideration the Commission's always given to those that are part of our community and that are in need. I'm also here tonight as the founder of True Colors, so thank you for considering our request from Special Alcohol. It hasn't been quite a year yet since I conceived of this idea. I'm waiting for it to pop up in my Facebook memories sometime this week because it's been just a year since I came up with the idea of the need for a safe space for our queer youth. At the time, I was advocating for a CASA child who was 15, transgender, and had been kicked out of his house because his mother would not allow him to live there after he came out. And thinking about what his needs were and what would benefit him in this community. And that was one thing that was really missing, was a safe space where he could go and be with his peers and his allies and receive mental health services. And that's going to be the big focus of True Colors. And that's from the youth themselves. We went out and we interviewed hundreds of youth in this community and asked them, what do you want? And their answer was a safe space to be, mental health services, and a gender-affirming clothing closet where we can get clothes for those who are changing genders. Since that time, I have become the parent of a child who's a member of the LGBTQ community. My child came out last August. And this became all the more important to me at that point. So I will answer your question, Wynn, about funding. Our executive director is our only staff member. Obviously, we're brand new, right? We're just starting. She spends 25% of her time on administration and 75% on direct service. And so the funding we're requesting for a portion of her time, not all of it, but a portion that is direct service time, where she'll be working directly with the youth, providing activities, providing access to mental health services. We have a therapist who's contracting to be on our space that will be there full time to be able to provide mental health services for our youth. We have grant funding to be able to cover therapy costs for those who are not well insured, to be able to make sure they can access those. So to us, this is suicide prevention, it's drug and alcohol prevention. It's a way to make sure that we keep our youth safe. Go ahead. No, anybody who has questions.
You probably need, is there a place to sign in there?
There is.
Okay.
I will
would
do
you
that.
mind? Thank you, Jamie.
Of course. Thanks for letting me talk.
Well, that's the purpose. While Jamie's signing in, is there anyone else that wishes to come forward and talk about all or part of the social services budget? Pardon? Oh, or any other thing we talked about tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay. With that, we'll close the public comment period. And is there commission discussion, or are we?
I know you got, I wanted some feedback on telling the Social Service Advisory Board some kind of guideline or something. And so I started out my public service career on the Social Service Advisory Board. I've told everybody that before, sitting at the feet of Edith Stunkel and C. Clyde Jones. And so it was, yeah, I have no interest in slicing the budget or anything like that that some other people have proposed at various times. But I do think the same reason that we need more social service funding is why we can't provide unlimited social service funding, because everybody's hurting to some degree or another with inflation, because inflation is affecting everybody. And so there's got to be a balance and a limit to what we can do. To provide some, just throw something out there guidance-wise, I would kind of propose the idea of maybe 90% of last year's mill levy value as a target number. And if it's going to be, I'm sure it won't be less than that, but if you propose something higher than that, then it needs to be something fairly extraordinary has changed. But that way, you could figure in some inflationary growth to the annual budget that way, without, yeah, and then knowing that there is a cap as to what the commission will probably sign off on. So throw that out there for discussion.
I think that's a good idea, Mark. What would 90% of last year's mill be? Does anybody have a calculation?
Not my phone or a calculator, but I will bring up the PowerPoint.
Because their ask is 574,000.
So last year's mill value was 598,000, or 2022, 718, so 90% of that is about 540. A little bit less than 540.
Yeah, I agree with some sort of guideline to put in there. I don't know what the percentage should be of a mill. And I don't think we would be rock solid that that's all we could do, but would be, as you said, if there's something extra that comes out, we could always look at it, but would kind of give them that target to be able to do, because this, another 125,000, 28% more, given all the other challenges we have, I think is quite a big, increase. That and the 38% for the transportation agencies are pretty big. Library came in basically at what the valuations were, and they're pretty much set unless we change the charter ordinance, and actually their benefit fund, only came in at 2.6%. Special alcohol came in at about the same thing, but they're dependent on what we bring in, so I'm fine with their stuff. And then again, Tourism Convention Fund is funded, and they're going to get what comes in. I think DMI has done a good job in bringing in new businesses, and they are increasing their own people's fees as well. to come in, so they're putting some skin in the game. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I do like the idea of coming up with some mill percentage, and I think those two really big ones, we have to look at pretty hard, I think.
So I was thinking before, you said 1 mil of last year, since they weren't given a parameter, I would consider doing the 90% of this year's evaluation instead, just so they don't have to go back and
Right, no, I was thinking going forward.
setting something.
Yeah,
and then before.
Yeah, if we're going, if they wanted some guidelines for next year.
Right.
That's what, and I haven't really commented on this year, other than it seems high, but I don't know, I like Be Able. I think they're filling a nice niche. And the community health clinic.
Right.
Obviously, that's, going to the emergency room is the most expensive form of healthcare ever. And so you sure don't want to encourage that if we can help it. So, I don't know, it'd be just nice if we could if we had a pile of money somewhere that wasn't property tax.
Well, I was thinking that I think of this, the asks are more of an investment because their operational costs are so much larger. And I often see this as, if communities that they apply for grants from, if they see a city allotment of some kind, then they tend to ask, 5% of, 10 times more or something like that, just for that city support. But it's also, I visited most of these organizations in our community. Even though they get funding from not just us, but from other grants, they run such a strict budget and have very few staff that are mostly just doing a labor of love and being paid very little for it and maintaining most of it with volunteers. So I think, thank you for the work you've done on social services and the special alcohols funds as well. I think that's a tremendous amount of legwork, and you get to see the needs in our community. And suicide rates are increasing. We've seen that. We know substance abuse has been increasing. We've seen that as well. I'm glad the 988 suicide hotline is out there, but even though they allotted $10 million, I don't know what that means for communities. As we said, staffing is always a problem. Adibus, I think they've indicated how much they make, their return on investment, as did the other organizations. So yeah, I look forward to other conversations, but dedicating something would be a good option.
And I think as a guideline, that's what I'd like to call it, I guess, as a rule of thumb, a guideline, so that the committee has a target. But we also need the flexibility if they're, the problem is there are always going to be more organizations coming too, which reduces the amount that the ongoing organizations get. So it's a conundrum. I also think it's important that the ATA bus, they have to have the match, because these other programs, Be Able and the community clinic, and so many of these low-income programs that we have, it's the only means for people to get around the community, short of affording a vehicle and gas, and mostly they're just trying to survive and subsist. So.
Yeah, well, as Linda says, I talk too much. I got a page of things here to cover with you. Because I've always thought, we did strategic planning, that one of the things that we didn't do a good job on was putting in that long-range plan exactly how you're gonna do consistent budgeting. And that comment about the 1 mil is it. I've said that for years, that we should have a 1 mil cap. But I didn't just mean on social services, I meant on all outside agencies, 1 mil that are being financed through the general fund. So, if I was gonna change, our process, I would do it this way. First thing is establish 3 budget definitions for outside agencies so that it's clear. We have mandated outside agencies that we can't do anything about. Metropolitan Planning Organization is one. They send us a bill every year. The Riley County Police Department and the City Library, which is caused by the charter ordinance. And we can't control that. We can't change their budget. It gets dumped on us. And then the city has to work around it. Then second, we've got a category which I would call special sales tax funded agencies. And And that's clearly the Special Alcohol Board is the first one. And that one's never been a problem for me because they get X amount of sales tax and they spend it. They get no more, no less. So you budget it and do a great job. The other category is the transient guest tax. Now, we've, as a commission, sort of made the decision that we'd fund CVB, the Chamber, the Manhattan Arts Center, Wolf House, and the 2 business districts out of that. And again, I don't have a problem with that because it does not affect property tax or the general fund. And you get what you get. If the transient guest tax is not collected, you're not gonna get your funds. And so I have no problem with that. The issue is the discretionary, what I call discretionary outside agencies. And that's anybody else that comes wanting money. So that's everybody in the Special Alcohol Board, and it would also be ATA. And I would include things like the Flint Hills Regional Council, everybody that we have to pay dues to. That's all discretionary, and it comes out of the general fund. And that's where I'd put the 1 mil cap. And so you got 1 mil and all that, and that's all it's ever gonna be. But it would, by definition, increase every year as the value of the mill goes up. And I would also consider taking the Social Services Advisory Board and the Special Alcohol Board and combining them into one board to prevent duplication of effort. And of course, that would complicate things a little bit because then you'd have 2 funding sources. But we have problems getting people on the committee, on both committees, so this might, reduce the workload as far as the number of people involved, but maybe, I've always looked at duplications. You get an agency, it's got to come and apply for the Special Alcohol Board, we want money, and the Social Services Advisory Board. So they're doing double work. So maybe we could consolidate that, and it would save some efforts. The next one will be sort of controversial. A lot of people won't like it. Maybe I'll get somebody to show up with a Save Our Social Services pin like happened a few years ago. But if I was going to give guidance to the advisory board, I would recommend that over the next 4 years, we transition from coming to the city for money and figuring out how to manage it through the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation. And I've talked to Vern about that a couple times. And a number of cities have done that. Like Topeka basically said, sorry, we're not financing it anymore. I think they did that 3 years ago. And I would like to see it transitioned, so that it's not a general fund item. And we get the money someplace else. And then the last thing to make the budgeting easier is I think we need to change the charter ordinance for the city library to make certain that it includes the employee benefit fund, because the 6 mills they have does not include that. Now, the library's done a great job, for the 10 years I've been here, because they've always kept it under 6, and I've talked to them about that. But there's nothing that prevents them from going over 6. And I really have advocated many years that should be redone. But that's my thoughts on the funding.
Thank you.
So would there be some way, going to having Vern and the GMCF help take over, are you just guessing that have people donate directly to the foundation and then have them set up their own sort of social services advisory board fund? Is that sort of what you're thinking? I like the idea. I'd like for them to get their money. I just don't want it to come from property taxes, if possible. The charitable idea is great, and Vern's always saying he's got money to give more or less. And so, that's...
We didn't work out the details, but, I talked to Vern, he thought it could be transitioned over a few years. And it would be interesting to do that. I wouldn't just pull the plug on it in 1 year, but if you had a long-range plan where, okay, we're gonna reduce the amount every year, over 4 years, and then eventually transition it over to there, it could work. And it's worth a shot, instead of, just because the amount of money these agencies are gonna need is just gonna keep going up, and the number of agencies is gonna keep going up. And it would be nice to be able to just say, okay, I could take that 1 mil cap, all outside agencies 1 mil, and go from there. And then it's easier for everybody budgeting in the city. And we need to spend the money on other things like Parks and Rec and the roads and everything else that goes on here.
What is sort of our deadline for making a final decision about these numbers tonight? not till end of August or something.
Yeah, not till your public hearing date in September.
So we have a couple of months to have somebody sit down with Vern and some coffee and see, maybe we could, yeah, if they could take $100,000 out of this year's, if they could sort of commit to a certain dollar amount for 2023, then we could bring our number down a couple $100,000 or something, and then maybe, if they could look at a fourth or a third of it for next year, and then, I think that'd be great if we could get, they have the ability to absorb that through some of their charitable foundation money.
I would just caution on that, but I do like several of the other ideas tossed out there. I would just caution sending it into the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation. They already have a Grown Green Day, and most of these organizations, plus 100 more, already on it, and people do donate. We have a very generous community that donates it. But the system of how it works is some of it goes to the organization, some of it goes to an endowment. You have to have a $10,000 this or something. So there's lots of factors for those types of organizations. And I feel as a local government, it also is part of our responsibility to take care of all of our community members. And to this extent, when we have a contract with the chamber or we seem to have millions and millions of dollars for all types of other projects. I think having $500,000 or whatever it might be to serve hundreds and thousands of people that are in need, it's one of our core government obligations to take care of all of our residents. With the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation, this governing body no longer has any say in it. So somebody else has that structure in place, and everybody else may or may not have the same type of resources you have to basically fundraise again, and you need a marketing system of some kind, again, for those organizations to go and ask community members to donate to that organization. And they are already doing that, like I said, when it comes to Grow Green Day or whatever it might be. I'm on the Greater Manhattan Community Foundation where we do allot money to organizations, and we've had several that we were able to meet their needs this year and have still a little bit left over. But again, what they look at is very different than what we look at. They won't do salaries. They don't do certain things where we feel responsible to do, and that's part of the ask, such as most of them did ask for some kind of salaries for their staff or community directors or whatever it might be. Those are generally not fit into a Greater Manhattan Community Foundation. And like I said, most of these organizations are already affiliated with that. I just don't want us to remove our responsibility. We have 13 agencies that ask for social services, and some of them are also in the other one, and they have millions and millions of dollars of budget. But their asks are not percentage-wise, probably less than their 5% of their operational costs. And I think that's very doable for our community. Even the 1 mil suggestion for social services, or 90% of a mil, would be adequate to cover that. So I think we need to be cautious before just giving it off to some other organization to take care of it when it is still our responsibility.
Well, I heard about the idea before about the community foundation and thought it had a lot of merit, and we keep talking about with the budget of coming up with other funding sources, but it seems like we never come up with any of those funding sources, or we don't like them if we do come up with them. But, we just had to have some big funding for the payroll increases because of the salary challenges. I think we all hear about streets, roads that we need to do, and saying that's a fundamental thing that we should be taking care of. Our CBD challenges are hitting us again this year. And we've also all heard about Parks and Rec, and how that's another fundamental thing that we need to take care of, and we have our own inflation challenges. So I think we need to look at all the different ways that we can handle it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we can't do it. If other cities have done it, I think, we need to look at all the different ways that we can handle things and overall, spread it out and be able to take care of our core responsibilities and not leave anybody high and dry, and take a look at these other things.
I appreciate that that the committee made recommendations to support the community clinic at a time when we know those services have been valued here in this community. I think that there is out of a budget as large as our city, it seems to me that 500,000 is nominal with regard to the services that we're providing that are not being covered in other ways. And we have a population here, whether it's the ATA, ridership, or all of these other agencies that are, in many ways, that the city should be serving and at least being a part of the solution. No one of us can be the total solution, but we can each come together and be part of the solution. It's a kind of a, sum of the parts, or and make it work. And that's what we've been doing over these long years here in this community. And I think it's been a good solution. And not everybody gets everything they want, but there is still support. And so I hope that we continue. I do have a concern about turning it over to a totally separate organization whose values are not necessarily what we would do here. And so that would be my feedback for this evening. With that.
There's one other slide that I guess wasn't presented in the packet there, which is an updated on that evaluation, the mill levy slide. Could we just put that up there? Because I think the one we saw last budget meeting wasn't quite correct because we didn't have all the data from the county yet. Yeah, that's it there.
So the estimated valuation for 2022 from Raleigh and Pike County is at $633,970,987, which equates to a mill value of $633,971. The percent increase is 5.9%. And then below you have the forecasted tax levies for 2023, what was levied for 2022, the increase for each of the outside city service funds compared to the increase for the property tax for city services, their respective mill levies that are forecasted for 2023 and then 2022. From the last meeting on June 14th, was requested that 52.143 mills for 2022 be the same for 2023. And so the net increase to the outside was 0.860 mills, and then the city services decreased by 0.860 mills for a 0 mill increase.
Okay, now does this calculate what we were just presented on outside agencies? I mean,
That would be absorbed in the budget.
And that's what the concern is we don't want to absorb, additional increases on outside agencies by cutting parks and rec programs. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I want for me, the 0 mill is what I wanted to see as the minimum, and that's still going to be a budget increase for the city.
Sir, we're not done with the budget process yet. We're still working through reviewing Public Works information. We haven't even had meetings with them yet. So once we get through meeting with Public Works, then we'll have more information in terms of our estimated total budget for the general fund as well as the other funds. And we will come back to the City Commission with that information.
Okay, because it's important to know that, if there's going to be increases in outside agencies, is that going to have a negative impact on city services? And I know Jason and I had the discussion last meeting when I mentioned, the RCPD increase. If we absorb it, then of course it has an impact somewhere on city services. But I recommended we go ahead and do that for RCPD because it's essential. I'm not sure I feel that way about other outside agencies. And the exception, of course, is those that have dedicated streams, like the transient guest tax and the special alcohol board. That's not in this discussion. It's the ones that are going to impact the general fund information. And I know that's a giant puzzle, but that looks more encouraging than the one that we saw at the first meeting. So appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, Rena, thank you.
Thank you.
all for coming this evening. I appreciate it. It's labor of love to work with the city budget. Thank you.